The other thing that concerns me about this is that Corridors of Commerce is a road that is a program that was really developed, and we in rural Minnesota saw a lot of hope with the Corridors of Commerce program as a way to connect regional centers with four-lane highways, better highways. And certainly in my region of the state, but all over the state, there's some hope to do that. I think if you look at the economic performance in greater Minnesota, you find that our regional centers are core centers where we have some opportunity for excellent jobs, where people can commute into to get those jobs. And infrastructure for regional centers like that is extremely valuable, especially for the kind of high-paying jobs that we really need out in the countryside. There's two problems with this bill with respect to Corridors of Commerce. The only source of funding that we've had both in this bill and then in 2013 is borrowing to pay for the Corridors of Commerce. This bill chooses to also borrow for the standard program. And if we're borrowing for the standard program going forward, will we have the opportunity, will we have the capacity to borrow for Corridors of Commerce? It's hard to see that. It's very hard to see that. And the projects, the number of projects out there that need to be done are very significant. And I just don't see how, I don't see that pathway in my provincial way. I don't see the pathway of completing a four-lane highway to New Ulm as a result. There's a second factor in this bill that argues the same. And that is the language as to how the project selection process is done for Corridors of Commerce has changed in this bill. I mentioned this before, and I thought the language has changed, but it didn't, and I'm disappointed by that. Because the Department of Transportation has determined that really, if we're going to go with the language in this bill, cities like New Ulm, Hutchinson, and cities of that ilk will be at a competitive disadvantage. And I think if you look at the OLA report, which was really the basis for this change, if you look at the projects that were evaluated back in 2013, you'll find that almost all of the money that received high rankings on the return to investment were in the metropolitan area. 438 million of those projects were in the metropolitan area that received a high or a medium ranking. Only 97.7 were in rural Minnesota. This is more similar to the criteria if we have the narrow criteria here. And of that 97.7, 51.5 million of that would be on the St. Michael Rogers run, which where I live, that feels very much like a metropolitan area. It's not technically in the metro district. So really what you're saying, what the reality of this is, and I think rural Minnesota needs to know this, and rural members, I think you need to think about this going forward. If you represent a city that is hopeful of having a four-lane expansion to connect to another regional corridor, you have to tell your mayor of that city that it's unlikely in this case with this change in these criteria. I think it's a step backwards. I think it diminishes significantly the hope that Minnesota had when Representative Hordenstein put into the transportation bill in 2013, the Corridors of Commerce program, and I just fundamentally think it's a mistake.